Claire and David Monroe were the kind of couple that drew quiet admiration. Their life seemed stable, almost enviable. A modest, neatly kept home in a quiet Ohio suburb. Claire, a soft-spoken elementary school teacher, was known for her gentle smile and homemade cookies at school events. David, a broad-shouldered construction supervisor, had calloused hands and a reputation for helping neighbors with broken fences or leaky pipes. They walked their dog every evening, waved at everyone. They passed and hosted barbecues in the summer. To anyone looking in, they were the portrait of stability and love. But that image was carefully constructed by Claire. Behind the closed doors of their picturesque home, things were falling apart. Their financial situation had crumbled in silence. Claire had racked up credit card debt, and David's hours had been cut after an accident at work. They were behind on bills, their savings drained, and creditors were beginning to call. David tried to stay positive. He picked up side jobs. He patched things up with duct tape and good intentions. But Claire had grown tired. She didn't like the look of desperation in his eyes. She didn't like the way their life had turned into a series of apologies and cut corners. Something inside Claire shifted. She stopped talking to David about money. She smiled less. Her movements became more calculated, as though she were preparing for something, counting down to an invisible deadline. She took longer walks alone. She stayed late at school for extra work. But the truth was, she had started visiting websites, forums, articles, videos about life insurance policies, payouts, and accidental deaths. She learned terms like contestability period and non-medical underwriting. She took notes. 3 weeks before David died, Claire made a call. She spoke to an insurance broker and inquired about a policy for her husband. She was calm, casual, even a little cheerful. She explained that David was healthy, had no known illnesses, and worked in a high-risk industry. That helped justify the size of the policy, $500,000. The broker was impressed by her efficiency. Claire had all the details ready. David's date of birth, work history, even his driver's license number. There was no need for a medical exam, just a signature. Claire managed to get David to sign the papers by convincing him it was just in case something ever happened. She played the worried wife. He barely looked at the document. It didn't matter to him. To Claire, it meant everything. She made the first premium payment the next morning. In the days that followed, Claire's behavior was unremarkable. She still packed David's lunch. She still waved to the neighbors. But behind the scenes, she began cleaning the basement, an area they rarely used. She moved furniture. She adjusted the lighting. She tested the steps. She made mental notes. One night, a neighbor noticed her standing at the bottom of the driveway, just staring at the house. When asked about it later, Claire said she was just thinking. No one gave it much thought. Claire had always been a planner. But now her plans had crossed a line that no one could see. She had found a way out. One that didn't require talking, healing, or fixing what was broken. It only required time. And soon, she would have everything she needed. A broken marriage, a silent policy, and a husband whose life was worth more dead than alive. The call to 911 came just after midnight. Claire's voice was trembling as she told the dispatcher that her husband had fallen down the basement stairs. The operator kept her on the line until the first responders arrived. When paramedics entered the Monroe home, they found David lying at the bottom of the staircase, his head resting in a pool of blood. The scene was quiet, almost sterile. Claire stood a few feet away, clutching her robe, eyes wide but dry. Basement was dimly lit, with a single overhead bulb flickering faintly. The staircase was steep, wooden, and without a railing on one side. It wasn't hard to imagine someone missing a step and falling. David's injuries were severe, his skull was fractured, and his neck appeared twisted unnaturally. The coroner later noted the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with a fall. No autopsy was initially requested. There was no reason to suspect anything more. Claire explained that David had gone downstairs to check on a strange noise. She said she stayed upstairs waiting, then a loud crash. She found him moments later. He was unresponsive. She insisted it all happened so fast. She cried when she spoke, though her face remained oddly composed. Detectives on scene didn't feel a need to press further. Accidents happened. The house was old. The stairs were dangerous. Within hours, Claire's version of events was accepted as truth. The following morning, news of David's sudden death spread across the neighborhood. Friends and co-workers expressed shock. He was known for being careful, even cautious. Some were surprised he had even used the basement at all. Others sent flowers and casseroles. No one suspected Claire. She was the grieving widow now. She wore black, avoided eye contact, and walked slowly as if the weight of loss was too much to bear. The funeral was small and simple. Claire sat alone in the front row, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She gave a brief eulogy, speaking softly about love, hardship, and the unpredictability of life. People wept. A few embraced her afterward, whispering words of comfort. She nodded and thanked them. But something in her eyes stayed distant, like her mind was already somewhere else. Within 2 weeks, Claire contacted the life insurance company. She submitted the necessary forms, a copy of the death certificate, and a letter explaining the circumstances. She asked if the claim could be processed quickly due to outstanding debts. The policy had an accidental death clause, which would double the payout. Claire was careful to highlight that David's death fit those terms. She attached the coroner's statement, which listed the incident as an accidental fall. The company began reviewing the claim. It looked routine. The timeline was clean. There were no red flags on the surface. Claire's tone in her communication was calm, professional, and polite. She followed up every few days, always checking in with a smile. In her voice, as the payout moved closer to approval, Claire began making plans. She called a real estate agent to quietly discuss the possibility of selling the house. She spoke to a financial advisor about managing a large sum of money. She mentioned her unexpected windfall and her intention to start fresh somewhere new. No one questioned her. She had played her role perfectly, but behind the closed doors of an insurance office, someone had received a strange message. A single sentence sent anonymously that would change everything. You need to look at this again. Nothing about it was an accident. Asterisk, the email was brief, unsigned, and sent through an encrypted server. At first, the claims agent thought it was a prank. Insurance companies receive strange tips all the time. Bitter relatives, angry exes, people trying to stall a payout for their own reasons. But something about the message felt different. There were no wild accusations or dramatic stories. Just one sentence. You need to look at this again. Nothing about it was an accident. By procedure, the claim was flagged and passed to the Special Investigations Unit. Claire wasn't informed. Internally, the payout was paused. A caseworker named Jason took over, tasked with either closing the case or escalating it to law enforcement. His first step was routine. Go back through the application, timeline, and surrounding circumstances. Right away, certain details began to stand out. The timing of the policy was too neat. Claire had taken it out just 3 weeks before David died. That alone wasn't illegal. But combined with her insistence on fast payout and her emphasis on the accidental death clause, it raised concern. Jason pulled the original call transcript from the agent who sold Claire the policy. She had asked very specific questions: how long it took to process accidental claims, whether stairs would count, and what documentation was needed if no autopsy had been done. It wasn't proof, but it was odd. Jason dug further. He contacted the hardware store mentioned in Claire's financial logs. Surveillance footage showed her entering the store 2 days before David's death. She bought industrial-strength cleaning supplies, a pack of rubber gloves, and a flashlight. It didn't seem unusual on its own until he compared that to the basement photos taken by police the night of David's death. There was no cleaning fluid, no gloves, no new flashlight. Nothing she had purchased was ever found in the home. That flashlight became the first real lead. The coroner had originally attributed David's injury to a head impact on the corner of a concrete step. But now, a second look was warranted. Jason contacted a forensic pathologist, asking them to re-examine the angle and depth of the wound. The results came back troubling. The fracture in David's skull was inconsistent with a fall. The impact was too localized and too deep. It looked like he had been struck possibly by a cylindrical object, a flashlight perhaps. Jason submitted his findings to the authorities. Local detectives reopened the case quietly, without alerting Claire. A search warrant was issued for digital records. Investigators combed through Claire's internet history and phone logs. What they found only deepened the suspicion. In the weeks leading up to David's death, Claire had searched for things like how much insurance pays after accidental death, how to stage a fall, and how long to wait before cashing in. A policy. She'd also looked up stair-related deaths, neck fracture timelines, and whether hitting someone in the head could kill them instantly. Her emails showed no signs of grief-only conversations with financial advisors and relocation services. Investigators retrieved garbage bags from the landfill matching Claire's trash pickup day. Inside one, they found a stained shirt David's size covered in dried blood. They also recovered a broken flashlight, its surface smeared with what appeared to be blood. It was enough to make a case, but there was one final piece that shifted everything. David had sent a text to a coworker a week before his death. "Something's wrong with Claire. She's been acting weird. I think she's hiding something. I don't even feel safe in the house anymore." No one had taken the message seriously at the time. Now it read like a warning, one that had gone unheard until it was too late. The investigators moved quickly but silently. Claire still had no idea she was being watched. She continued her daily routine grocery shopping, walking the dog, calling the insurance company for updates. She was confident the money would arrive soon. She'd even begun browsing homes in another state, preparing for what she called her fresh start. To everyone around her, she was simply a grieving widow trying to move forward. But the truth was closing in. Detectives quietly re-interviewed the paramedics and the officers who arrived on the night of David's death. One paramedic remembered something strange. Claire hadn't gone near her husband's body until she was asked to confirm his identity. She stood in the corner, emotionless, arms crossed. Another officer recalled how unusually clean the basement had been. No dust, no clutter, no signs of storage. It felt staged, he said, but at the time, he dismissed the thought. Armed with a warrant, police searched Claire's devices and found a deleted folder on her laptop, buried beneath layers of files. Inside were detailed notes about life insurance, terms, ways to manipulate death investigations, and timelines showing when insurance policies typically become incontestable. One file stood out, a list of expenses, debts, and potential uses for a $500,000 payout. It was dated 2 weeks before David's death. They also recovered more from the trash they had pulled. Among the items was a receipt for the flashlight. Investigators confirmed it was the same model found broken and bloodied near the landfill. A forensic analysis linked the blood on the flashlight directly to David. The pattern of the wound on his skull matched the ridge design of the object. It was no longer a theory. He had been struck, not fallen. The story Claire had built began to collapse. Detectives brought in a biomechanical expert to reconstruct the supposed fall. Based on the position of David's body, the severity of the wound, and the absence of defensive injuries, they concluded that the fall was unlikely. In fact, almost impossible. The evidence pointed to a single forceful blow to the head, likely delivered from behind, catching them off guard. There were no signs of a struggle. Claire had waited for the right moment. When police brought her in for questioning, Claire kept her composure. She repeated her story with precision, sticking to every detail as she had from the beginning. She spoke softly, almost gently, as if still playing the role of the heartbroken wife. But her voice wavered when she was shown the flashlight. She asked for a lawyer. The district attorney moved quickly to file charges: first-degree murder and insurance fraud. Claire was arrested and booked without incident. Neighbors watched from their windows as she was led away in handcuffs. Whispers spread fast. The woman they thought they knew had crafted her life around deception, control, and cold calculation. As more evidence came forward, the story grew darker. Claire's financial history revealed that she had taken out a smaller policy years earlier, but canceled it when she realized it wouldn't cover accidental death. She waited, planned, and timed everything. She had tested the boundaries of what looked like an accident and counted on no one asking questions. But one anonymous email changed the entire trajectory. Someone out there had noticed. Maybe a coworker, a family member, or even a stranger who sensed something wasn't right. Claire's trial was set. The prosecution had a clean timeline, physical evidence, and motive. The quiet teacher with the gentle smile had become the prime example of how appearances could deceive. Her plan had nearly worked, but a single crack in the mask had been enough to let the truth bleed through. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. Reporters, neighbors, even strangers drawn by morbid curiosity filled the wooden benches. The woman who once handed out cookies at school events now sat silently at the defendant's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Claire Monroe showed no emotion as the charges were read aloud: first-degree murder and insurance fraud. She pled not guilty. The prosecution opened with a stark narrative. Claire had staged her husband's death to look like an accident, just weeks after purchasing a large life insurance policy. They laid out the timeline in methodical detail. The policy, the strange internet searches, the purchase of the flashlight, the altered basement, the deleted files. Every move had been precise, calculated, and all of it pointed to a chilling truth. David Monroe's death wasn't a tragic fall. It was a plan. Photos of the basement were shown to the jury. Then, the broken flashlight matched to the wounds on David's skull. The prosecutor played the security footage showing Claire buying the flashlight and cleaning supplies days before the incident. They explained how the original coroner had accepted the fall narrative too quickly, and how a second expert revealed the injuries were more consistent with an intentional strike. Claire's defense team struggled to poke holes. They argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that David's death, though suspicious in hindsight, could still have been accidental. They claimed the blood-stained items in the trash were from Claire's panic and misguided cleanup efforts. They emphasized that no eyewitnesses had seen Claire commit the crime. But the weight of the evidence kept pressing down. The most damaging blow came when the prosecution introduced David's final text message. Sent a week before his death to a coworker, it read, "Claire's been acting weird. I don't feel safe at home anymore." The courtroom fell silent. It wasn't just fear, it was a warning, one no one had taken seriously. Until now, witnesses came forward to speak about Claire's sudden behavioral changes, her odd calmness after David's death, and her eagerness to collect the insurance money. Financial experts explained how deeply in debt she had been, and how the policy payout would have erased all her problems overnight. The jury listened and watched. Claire never took the stand. Her lawyers advised against it. Her silence only deepened the mystery. Was she cold and calculating, or simply being smart under pressure? The jury didn't hesitate. After just 6 hours of deliberation, they returned with a verdict: Guilty on all counts, the judge sentenced Claire to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There were no tears, no final pleas. Just a woman who had gambled everything and lost. But even after the sentence, questions lingered. Who had sent the anonymous tip? Investigators never confirmed it. Some believed it was David's co-worker, spurred by that haunting message. Others speculated it was a neighbor who noticed Claire acting strangely. The truth remains unknown. But that message, just one sentence, was enough to shatter a perfect plan. The case gripped the nation not just because of the crime, but because of how ordinary Claire had seemed. A wife, a teacher, a neighbor, someone who smiled politely and remembered birthdays. She had fooled everyone until she didn't. David Monroe died believing something was wrong. And he was right. His death wasn't just the end of a troubled marriage. It was the final move in a silent, deadly strategy. Claire had bet everything on the world believing her story. But the truth has a way of rising, even from the bottom of the stairs.